Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. Today, we once again open a familiar, yet no less mysterious book, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. The second part of J.K. Rowling's great saga brings us back to Hogwarts, where the boy who lived must face secrets lurking in the darkest corners of the school. This time, Harry's enemy is not just an unknown force hunting students, it's also fear itself, fear of being misunderstood, blamed, cast out. And yet, despite the atmosphere of suspense and drama, attentive fans have found a few lingering questions that were never truly answered. So let's explore the most curious and puzzling moments of the Chamber of Secrets, moments that might just change the way you see the book. Enjoy the video. Number 1. Fawkes enters the chamber. But how? The scene where Fawkes arrives at the last second to aid Harry against the Basilisk still inspires awe. The flaming phoenix descends like a divine messenger, blinds the monster, drops the hat, and saves the hero. It feels like divine intervention, but where did he come from? Just a few pages earlier, Ron and Lockhart were stuck on the other side of a collapsed tunnel with the entrance to the chamber completely blocked. So Fawkes found another way? Or can phoenixes simply teleport into sealed-off spaces? And if that's the case, why doesn't the magical world use phoenixes more strategically in combat? Or does the chamber secretly have more than one entrance, unknown even to Slytherin himself? Number 2. Moaning Myrtle. First floor or second? The ghost of Moaning Myrtle left an impression with her mournful wails and tragic tale. Hermione first says she haunts a bathroom on the first floor, but later the trio secretly brews Polyjuice potion in her bathroom, which the book clearly places on the second floor. So does Myrtle have two homes, or is someone at Hogwarts just really bad with directions? It's a small detail, but one that bothers fans, especially those trying to draw accurate maps of the school. Number 3. The book, cover, and a mistake only birdwatchers will catch. The British edition of Chamber of Secrets features a vivid cover illustration, Harry and Ron flying in the Weasley Ford Anglia, Hedwig soaring alongside them. A classic scene. But eagle-eyed readers noticed something off. The owl on the cover is a barn owl, not a snowy owl. Sure, the artist might have taken creative liberties, but this is Harry's beloved pet. And surely Rowling saw the final artwork. That makes this a small but obvious blunder, and the blame lies with everyone involved in the production. Number 4. Parseltongue. Language or magical hearing aid. When Harry speaks to a snake during the dueling club scene, it causes a major stir. Everyone hears the hissing, but in later scenes, such as when Harry hears the Basilisk in the pipes, Ron and Hermione hear absolutely nothing. So, only Parselmouths can hear Parseltongue. That makes the language more than just a mode of communication. It becomes a kind of magical perception. But then why could everyone hear hissing during the duel? Was Harry somehow speaking on two levels, normal and snake-like? Mysterious. Number 5. Dobby's magic and the Ministry's convenient blind spot. When Dobby bursts into the Dursleys' home and uses a levitation charm, the Ministry immediately sends Harry a warning, but that wasn't the only spell the elf cast. He teleported, sealed doors, and vanished, all leaving magical traces. So why did the Ministry detect only one spell? Why didn't they question whether it was even human magic? Later, Harry nearly gets expelled for a disarming charm, but here he gets off with a warning. The logic seems to have short-circuited. Number 6. Valentine's Day that couldn't have happened. One of the book's most absurdly delightful scenes is Professor Lockhart's Valentine's Day celebration. Dwarves interrupting lessons with poems, students overwhelmed with hearts and glitter. But here's the snag. February 14th, 1993 fell on a Sunday. So why were there classes? Does the magical world have its own calendar? Or more likely, this was just a slip-up. Equal parts hilarious and unfortunate. Number 7, Tom Riddle's math error. The Dark Lord can't count. In one of the most dramatic revelations, Tom Riddle tells Harry that he is, in fact, Lord Voldemort. In their confrontation, he says, "Your mother gave you 12 years of borrowed time." It sounds poetic, but Harry was a baby when Voldemort fell, and he's 12 now, which means 11 years have passed, not 12. A small mistake, yes, but for a perfectionist like Tom Riddle, that's a serious slip. Maybe his arithmetic disappeared along with his nose. Number 8, why didn't anyone hear the basilisk in the pipes? The basilisk is no small serpent. It's the size of a train car slithering through the plumbing system of a 1,000-year-old castle. When Harry hears it, he's horrified. A cold voice whispering, "Kill, rip, tear," echoes through the pipes. But here's the problem. Only Harry hears it, not Ron, not Hermione, not McGonagall or Snape. No rumble, no scraping of scales against stone, just Harry, walking alone through empty corridors, haunted by a voice no one else notices. How is that possible? Hogwarts is full of students and staff. Peeves hears footsteps through walls. Mrs. Norris detects the tiniest noise, but a giant snake crawling inside pipes somehow goes unnoticed. Maybe the castle has magical insulation, or maybe the staff just assumed the banging and rattling was Filch cleaning with his ancient mop. Either way, a building full of magical experts failed to hear a monster the size of a bus dragging itself through stone tunnels night after night. Number 9. Who repaired the exploded bathroom? The second-floor girls' bathroom became a war zone. Cauldrons bubbled, steam clouded the mirrors, runes were scratched into the tiles. Hermione spent weeks brewing Polyjuice potion, a recipe so advanced even 7th years feared it. Then came the explosion. A shattered cauldron, scalding potion, burnt floors. "It's not supposed to do that," Hermione muttered, dragging the unconscious Millicent's cat hair sample out of the mix. The place looked like a cursed lab, and yet, in the next chapter, it's pristine. No smoke, no cracks, no trace. So who fixed it? Not Filch. The caretaker hated magic. He wouldn't set foot in Myrtle's bathroom unless someone made him. And certainly not the trio. They barely escaped detention, let alone construction duty. There's no scene where McGonagall storms in with a mop. No mention of Flitwick casting repair charms. Did the school enchant itself to heal over time? Or did the castle simply decide to ignore it, like it does every other disaster? Once again, the biggest mess in the story gets cleaned up, quietly, invisibly, and without a single line of explanation. Number 10. Why didn't they clean the bloody message? The message was written in blood, or something that looked exactly like it. "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware." That red sentence stretched across the wall, dripping slightly right above the stiff body of Mrs. Norris, and for days no one wiped it away. Students passed it between classes. Teachers held emergency meetings in front of it. Even Dumbledore stood there, silent, gazing up at the chilling words, but not one of them tried to clean it. Was it real blood? If so, whose? And why leave it there for every child in the school to see? Hogwarts had magic for everything. One Scourgify could scrub the stone clean in seconds, but instead the blood remained, drying, curling, staining the walls like a warning. The professors claimed it was for evidence. But what kind of evidence needs to stay visible for a week in a school hallway filled with frightened children? Imagine McGonagall tolerating that kind of horror on her corridor wall. Imagine Snape walking past it without sneering at the mess. It makes no sense unless the message was meant to haunt. Not just the characters, but the readers too. Rowling chose to leave it there for atmosphere. But inside the world of the story, it's strange, illogical, and cruel. A sentence written in blood, a school too frightened or too passive to erase it. Number 11, what happened to Hagrid's roosters? It happens quietly. One morning, Hagrid bursts into the entrance hall and shouts, "Someone's been killing my roosters!" Just one line. No further explanation, no questions from the professors, no follow-up from the students. But those roosters could have ended the entire story before it began, because the cry of a rooster is fatal to a basilisk. That's not theory, it's magical fact, and something was silencing them one by one. The book never tells us who did it. The obvious suspect is Ginny Weasley under the influence of Tom Riddle's diary. She was possessed, manipulated, used as a vessel for his will. If the diary knew that roosters posed a threat, it makes sense that Riddle would force her to act. But here's the problem. Ginny doesn't remember anything. Later in the chamber, she cries, "I've been writing in it," and he's been writing back. "He made me do things." But she never says what. There's no clear moment when she admits to killing the birds. And could a 12-year-old girl even manage it? Roosters are loud, aggressive, and hard to catch, sneaking into Hagrid's hut in the dark, slitting the throats of magical poultry. It doesn't sound like Ginny, it sounds like something darker. But the only other suspect would be the basilisk itself. And that makes even less sense. How would a giant snake get into the hut? How would it find the birds, kill them, and leave no trace? The idea is almost laughable, and yet no other explanation is offered. This tiny moment, so easy to miss, carries huge weight. The rooster's cry could have ended the basilisk before Harry ever found the diary. Someone knew that, someone acted, but no one in the castle investigated, no one questioned it. Hagrid mourned his birds. Then the plot moved on, but deep beneath the school the creature grew stronger, and somewhere in the shadows its greatest weakness had already been quietly removed. Number 12. Why didn't Hermione warn anyone? Hermione was the smartest witch of her age. Everyone said so. She solved problems before anyone else even knew where to look. And when students began turning to stone in the corridors of Hogwarts, Hermione didn't wait. She went straight to the library. When the professors were whispering behind closed doors and students were too afraid to sleep, Hermione was studying. She knew it wasn't a ghost. She knew it wasn't a person. And then she found it, the answer, a basilisk. She tore the page from Moste Potente Magical Creatures, scribbled pipes in the margin, and ran. We know this because when she's found petrified, that paper is clutched in her frozen hand. It has everything: the yellow eyes, the instant death, the fact that spiders flee. The note is a complete explanation of what's happening in the castle, but she told no one. Not Harry, not Ron, not even McGonagall. She ran with the answer alone and nearly died with it. Why didn't she share it? She had every reason to. A monster was hunting students. She had seen the signs, the writing on the wall, the frightened spiders. She had even warned Harry earlier. "I think I've figured it out, but I need to check something." That was her last sentence before being attacked. She left the common room with a mirror in her hand, hoping to reflect the basilisk's gaze instead of meeting it directly. But she never returned. Hermione's silence almost cost lives. She wasn't being selfish. She wasn't hiding the truth. She was trying to confirm it, alone. And that was her mistake. She tried to protect others by taking the risk herself. But some dangers are too big for even the brightest students. If she had spoken just one sentence before she left, the attacks might have ended that same night. Instead, it took another fall, Ginny, into the chamber before the truth came out. And Hermione had known it all along. Number 13. Why didn't Harry show the diary sooner? When Harry finds Tom Riddle's diary in the Chamber of Secrets, it's already oozing mystery. No name on the cover, empty pages. Then suddenly black ink starts writing back to him, a voice in the paper, a mind with memories. Riddle speaks gently, politely, like a friend from the past. And Harry, despite all that's happened, doesn't tell a soul. Not McGonagall, not Dumbledore, not even Hermione, who lives for puzzles like this. He keeps the diary to himself like it's a private secret. And it's not as if he's unaware of the danger. By the time he starts writing in the diary, students have already been attacked. The school is on edge. The legend of the chamber has resurfaced. But Harry, for reasons never quite explained, decides that a book that writes on its own isn't alarming enough to report. He asks the diary about the past, gets drawn into a magical memory, watches Riddle accuse Hagrid of opening the chamber. Not once does Harry stop to ask, should I be doing this? The moment he realizes the diary shows real events, the danger becomes clear, but he still keeps it to himself. When he finally does mention the diary, it's too late. Ginny is already in trouble. She's pale, sickly, frightened. And Harry, looking back, realizes she had the diary before him. "I think it was you who made her write the messages on the walls," he says to the diary later. He pieces it all together after Ginny disappears into the chamber. If he had shown the diary to Dumbledore, everything might have been different. A Horcrux could have been destroyed. A girl might have been spared weeks of terror. But the moment slipped by. Perhaps it's Harry's youth. Perhaps it's pride. Maybe it's the part of him that never wants to bother adults unless it's life or death. But in this case, silence almost cost Ginny her life. The diary wasn't just a clever artifact, it was a trap. And Harry, unknowingly, kept the door wide open. Number 14, how did Hagrid know about the spiders? When Hagrid is taken away to Azkaban in the Chamber of Secrets, he doesn't cry or shout. Instead, he leans toward Harry and whispers, "If anyone wanted to find out some stuff, all they'd have to do would be to follow the spiders." It's a strange message, oddly specific. But how does Hagrid know that spiders are running away from the monster in the castle? He was expelled in 3rd year, never found out what the real creature was, and always believed it had been Aragog, his acromantula. So where did this sudden certainty come from? Hagrid couldn't have known it was a basilisk. No one had said the word yet. But the advice to follow the spiders only makes sense if he understood the creature was something that terrified them. That only applies to one monster in the wizarding world. Basilisks are the natural enemy of spiders. Aragog himself later tells Harry and Ron, "We do not speak of it. We do not name it. We do not even leave the nest while it is awake." That level of fear doesn't come from rumors, it comes from instinct. But Hagrid had no way of knowing that unless someone or something told him. The only logical explanation is that Aragog told Hagrid what was happening. Somewhere between the start of the attacks and Hagrid's arrest, he must have visited the Forbidden Forest and spoken to his old friend. Aragog, still lurking in his lair, would have sensed the presence of the creature and recognized it. If Aragog had refused to speak of it even then, Hagrid would have at least seen his fear, and that fear alone might have told him more than words ever could. The spiders were running. Hagrid had seen it before. But here's the real question. Why didn't he tell Dumbledore? If Hagrid suspected that a deadly creature had returned to the school, why didn't he scream it from the rooftops? Maybe he was afraid no one would believe him again. Maybe he thought people would blame Aragog once more. So instead, he gave a cryptic warning to Harry, the only person he trusted. Follow the spiders. The message wasn't just a clue. It was Hagrid's quiet way of protecting the school. One last time. Number 15, Professor Binns denies the obvious. It was in Professor Binns's classroom, amid the cold grey walls and the droning monotone of a ghostly voice, that a curious moment occurred, one that upon deeper reflection opens a troubling crack in the logic of Hogwarts history. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, as students first bring up the legend of the chamber, the ancient professor dismisses it without hesitation. The legend of the Chamber of Secrets is nonsense, Binns states, floating above the ground, wholly uninterested in the fear already creeping through the corridors of the school. But the oddity lies not in his tone, nor even in his unwillingness to entertain myth, but in the stunning fact that Binns, a professor who taught at Hogwarts even after death, is completely unaware that the chamber is, in fact, real. It would be easy to write off Professor Binns's attitude as mere stubbornness. After all, he is famously detached from the living, uninterested in gossip. and perpetually lost in the swirl of dates and names that make up his dry lectures. But the problem is far more complex. How can a teacher, even one dead and ghostly, be so oblivious to a catastrophic event in Hogwarts history? Not only did the chamber open 50 years earlier, resulting in a student death and the wrongful expulsion of Rubeus Hagrid, but the school was nearly shut down entirely. These are not trivial events buried in obscure records. They are foundational scars in the timeline of the school, and Binns, whose sole purpose is to teach Hogwarts history, seems to know none of it. Consider the ghost himself. Professor Binns died in his sleep in the staff room, so the legend goes, and simply rose the next morning to continue teaching. He is described as forgetful, yes, and monotonous, but never malicious. Yet when Hermione Granger, the ever-curious seeker of knowledge, directly asks him about the Chamber of Secrets, he becomes defensive. "I do not deal in myths and legends," he replies, then launches into a historical account of the founding of Hogwarts. He speaks of Salazar Slytherin's split from the other founders and admits that Slytherin disagreed with the others about the sort of students they should admit to Hogwarts. But that's where he stops. No mention of the previous attack, no mention of Moaning Myrtle, who haunts a bathroom not far from his classroom. No reference to Hagrid's expulsion, an event so severe that Dumbledore himself could not reverse it. Moaning Myrtle died in that bathroom. Her death is a confirmed incident, one that left a girl lifeless and caused the Ministry to pressure the school into drastic measures. Her name may have faded from the Ministry's documents, but not from the castle's memory. Students still fear her bathroom. Peeves mocks her endlessly. She herself remembers the very moment of her death, the sound of a boy speaking in a strange language, the flash of yellow eyes, and then nothing. If a ghost can recall their death with that much clarity, why can't another ghost recall the event that followed? The truth is, Binns must have known about Moaning Myrtle. The ghosts of Hogwarts do not live in isolation. They attend feasts, they gossip, they interact. The Bloody Baron glides past students in menacing silence. The Fat Friar chuckles at jokes. Even nearly headless Nick, with his cheerful manner, is deeply aware of the tensions and events of the school. In the Chamber of Secrets, Nick helps Harry and warns him of the whispers surrounding him. So how can Binns, a ghost who inhabits the castle every day, be unaware of a past incident that involved the death of a student, the suspension of classes, and the involvement of the Ministry of Magic? This is where the story begins to strain under its own weight. The expulsion of Hagrid is no minor footnote. It ruined the boy's life, confined him to the edges of society, and ensured he would never wield a wand again. Aragog, the giant spider Hagrid protected, still resides in the Forbidden Forest as living proof of the event. Dumbledore was deputy headmaster at the time, and even then suspected that Hagrid was innocent, yet could not stop the punishment. These were deeply political, controversial moments. Could Binns have missed them? Let us not forget that Hogwarts is a school that treasures its own legends. The founders are spoken of like mythic beings, their house traits etched into the very culture of the students. The ghosts themselves represent each house's legacy. If Slytherin's heir and his Chamber of Secrets were mere legends, then why is the entire school on edge the moment the attacks begin again? Why do teachers walk students between classes? Why is Dumbledore pressured by the Ministry? Why is Gilderoy Lockhart, of all people, considered a viable defence? Binns's denial is more than an oversight. It represents a willful refusal to see history as something dynamic, something still bleeding. He recites battles and treaties, yet forgets a death within his own school. His ignorance is not just odd, it is a narrative fracture. If the ghost is meant to embody the long memory of the school, his amnesia about the chamber renders him a symbol of everything dangerous in denial. When institutions refuse to recognize past wounds, they are doomed to repeat them. The most curious element in all of this is that Binns chooses the moment of legend to draw a hard line. He happily recounts stories of Slytherin's departure and the theoretical reasons for the founding conflicts, yet when the tale turns to the chamber, which notably is tied to a real death, he balks. Why? Because the story becomes too real. The past isn't just past. It walks the corridors in the form of ghosts. It drips from the ceiling in petrified spiders. It wails in the bathroom stall of a dead girl. Binns's refusal to accept the chamber as real is not due to lack of evidence. It is because the legend threatens the illusion of safety that his lectures represent. Number 16. Why didn't Ginny say anything? Ginny Weasley arrived at Hogwarts full of excitement, wide-eyed and full of dreams. Her first year at the castle should have been magical in all the right ways. New friends, enchanted corridors, and the promise of becoming someone in a place where greatness had walked before. Instead, she was pulled into darkness. Her slow descent into fear and silence is one of the most disturbing threads in the Chamber of Secrets. The most troubling part? She said nothing. Not to her loving parents, not to her many brothers, not to Hermione Granger, who had always seemed kind, not even to Dumbledore. The question remains, why? From the earliest pages, Ginny is described as pale, quiet, and distant. Her behaviour grows stranger each week. She cries for no reason, her hands shake, and her normally cheerful nature vanishes. Percy even mentions that she's been very upset for days. The twins make fun of her, not understanding the deeper terror behind her anxiety. Her mother, Molly Weasley, notices something is wrong, but chalks it up to homesickness. But Ginny wasn't merely missing home, she was being hollowed out from the inside by Tom Riddle's diary. And yet, despite all of this, she stays silent. Tom Riddle's diary isn't just a book, it's a magical artifact of terrifying power. But Ginny, though young, recognizes that something is wrong. She's terrified of what the diary is doing to her. In Chapter 13, after a series of terrifying events around the school, including the petrification of students and a cat, Ginny is found attempting to speak with Harry, but she's interrupted by Percy. Her anxiety is suffocating her, and yet she walks away again in silence. This isn't just fear, it's a decision to hold back what she knows, and it's that decision that demands attention. Ginny Weasley grew up in a family where love overflowed. Molly Weasley fretted over her children's every cold and heartbreak. Arthur Weasley, gentle and fascinated by Muggles, would have listened to any concern she brought to him. Even Fred and George, despite their endless jokes, would have stopped everything to protect their baby sister. But Ginny tells no one. She goes to bed at night with her mind filled with the voice of Tom Riddle, the manipulations of a soul that should not exist. I grew stronger and stronger on a diet of her deepest fears, says Riddle with quiet pride later in the book. That Ginny allowed it to continue is one of the darkest mysteries of her character. Some might argue that the diary was controlling her so completely that she was incapable of speaking, but the story disproves this. Ginny manages to throw the diary away at one point. She knows it's dangerous. She takes it and dumps it into a toilet in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. This act alone shows she is not fully under control. She's resisting, she's fighting, she knows what the diary is doing to her. And still she says nothing to Dumbledore, who might have recognized the magic for what it was. She passes him in the halls, sits in the same room during meals, and remains silent, even as students around her are being turned to stone. Even more striking is her silence toward Hermione. Hermione Granger, the cleverest student in her year, had already deduced that the monster in the chamber was a basilisk. Had Ginny spoken a single word, Hermione might have saved her long before Harry descended into the darkness beneath the school. Ginny had seen the writing on the wall. She had written the writing on the wall. She had nearly killed people. Even if the memories were fuzzy, distorted by the diary's influence, she had moments of clarity. We know this because of her fear, because of her attempts to speak, because of her tears. One can't ignore the symbolism of the bathroom scene. It was in the most private, hidden place, a haunted girl's bathroom, that she tried to rid herself of Tom Riddle. She didn't confide in a professor or a friend. She flushed the danger down a toilet and walked away, hoping perhaps that it would end. But that kind of evil doesn't wash away so easily. Someone picked up the diary. It returned to her hands, the connection resumed, and her silence deepened. In a world where magic is everything, the strength of the human mind and soul is still powerful. Ginny knew that she was being manipulated. She knew she was doing things she didn't want to do. And yet, shame overtook her. That's perhaps the most human reason for her silence. Imagine the horror of discovering that your hands had written messages in blood, that your feet had carried you into dark places you couldn't remember, that your magic, something you'd longed to use, was being twisted by an older, darker voice. Shame, not just fear, may have bound her tongue. There's also the overwhelming feeling of being a burden. Ginny Weasley was the youngest in a large family of loud, brilliant, exhausting brothers. Her mother loved her, but her brothers filled every room with noise and presence. At Hogwarts they had lives of their own. Percy was obsessed with being a prefect. Fred and George were too busy with jokes and pranks. Ron was absorbed in his friendship with Harry. Ginny, already lonely, might have believed that her problems didn't matter, that speaking up would only embarrass her, draw attention she didn't want, or make things worse. Then there's the manipulation of Tom Riddle himself. He was charming. He listened. He made her feel special. "Dear Tom," she had written, pouring out her soul. He responded with kindness, with understanding. By the time she realized she'd been tricked, she was already deeply dependent on him. This is classic emotional manipulation, something that happens in the real world far too often. Victims blame themselves, they protect their abuser, they retreat inward. And Ginny did just that. Her withdrawal was not cowardice, but a symptom of being emotionally imprisoned. Number 17, Polyjuice Potion and the cat hair incident. Hermione Granger was never careless. She was precise, methodical, and deeply committed to following rules, unless, of course, she was breaking them for a higher cause. So, when she embarked on the risky business of brewing Polyjuice Potion in her second year, it wasn't just a rule she was breaking, it was a mountain of them. A potion that takes a month to brew, a potion that can go catastrophically wrong, a potion that changes the very structure of a person. Hermione, more than anyone, knew the stakes. And yet in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, the result was a scene so odd, it casts a strange shadow over the logic of magic itself. She turned into a cat. That's not the strange part. Well, it is, but it's not the strangest part. What truly baffles readers, even on the 10th reread, is how this mistake happened in the first place. According to Hermione, she had taken what she believed to be a hair from Millicent Bulstrode, a Slytherin girl, in order to transform into her for infiltration purposes. But it wasn't Millicent's hair. It was, as the narrative later tells us, a cat's hair, found clinging to her robes, and that minor miscalculation sent Hermione to the hospital wing with fur, a tail, and whiskers. The potion had gone wrong, but in a curiously specific way. There are two levels of absurdity here, and both are difficult to ignore. First, Hermione Jean Granger, chose to pull a hair not from the girl herself, but from a fibre clinging to a robe. It doesn't match her established character. This is the same girl who raised her hand before even thinking about the answer, who once read Hogwarts, A History for Pleasure, and who later brewed Polyjuice Potion with such precision that Harry and Ron managed to sneak through the Slytherin common room undetected. She risked expulsion. She risked permanent transformation. And yet, in this moment, she left something so crucial, source of the DNA, to chance? Why would she, of all people, trust a strand of hair found on a robe? In a castle where students constantly bump into one another, where pets roam freely, where magical creatures are never far from the corridors? Wouldn't it be the most basic precaution to be certain of the source? The odds of a random hair on a robe belonging to an animal rather than the person are much higher than 0, yet Hermione failed to verify it. It makes no sense unless one imagines that J.K. Rowling needed the mistake to happen for narrative purposes and bent Hermione's character to fit it. But even that would be forgivable if it weren't for the second, far more troubling issue. The potion should not have worked at all. The rules of Polyjuice potion are clear. In the Half-Blood Prince, when Harry uses the potion to impersonate someone from the Ministry, it is evident that it requires human essence, human hair, nails, or skin. Professor Snape himself describes the potion in his advanced potion-making text as designed to transform the physical appearance of one human into that of another. Nowhere in its formulation is there a clause for interspecies transformation. It is, by definition, meant for humans. Not cats, not goblins, not centaurs, not anything else. And yet, Hermione's potion worked, or rather, it half worked. It caused her to take on cat features but not fully transform into a cat. Madame Pomfrey says, "You're not supposed to use it with animal hair." That implies it has happened before, or at least that such accidents are within the realm of known potion mishaps. But that opens a new dilemma. How does the potion know that the hair is animal in origin? And if it does, why doesn't it simply fail? The logical outcome should have been no transformation at all. Or if the potion is biologically sensitive, perhaps a violent rejection, nausea, magical expulsion, or even an explosion. But a partial transformation? That suggests that the potion has some capacity to accept non-human genetic material and still act upon it. In fact, it suggests something far more unsettling, that the line between human and animal is not as rigid in the magical world as we've been led to believe. This isn't a trivial point. The wizarding world depends heavily on rules that define what magic can and cannot do. Animagi, for instance, must undergo rigorous training to morph into animals, and it's an entirely different branch of transfiguration. Sirius Black turns into a dog. Professor McGonagall becomes a cat, but this transformation is controlled, studied, and registered. Animagi do not drink Polyjuice potion to turn into animals. They learn it over time. That's because the body must be trained to withstand such change. Yet Hermione, at age 12, accidentally creates a potion that crosses that species' boundary in a single gulp. It makes one wonder about the true nature of Polyjuice potion. Could it be far more powerful and more dangerous than anyone admits? If it can synthesize animal DNA into a hybrid human-animal form, it is operating at a level of molecular or magical biology that even trained adult wizards should fear. This borders on the alchemical, not transformation, but transmutation. And if Polyjuice potion has that kind of flexibility, why aren't there more horrific stories? Why aren't people using it to experiment with animal traits, strength, speed, night vision? What would stop someone from deliberately mixing animal DNA with human to create hybrids? The potion clearly doesn't explode. It doesn't reject the substance outright. It proceeds badly, yes, but still it works, and that's terrifying. Then again, perhaps the issue lies in Rowling's momentary lapse in narrative logic. Perhaps the visual of Hermione with a tail and fur was too tempting to pass up. After all, it paints a vivid picture of magical experimentation gone wrong. It's comedic. It shows the limits of even the brightest witch of her age. And it forces her offstage for a few crucial chapters, giving Ron and Harry time to investigate Malfoy alone. It serves the story. But it breaks the world. Number 18, no one investigated the diary's origin. When Harry Potter stood before Dumbledore in the ruins of his second year, holding the mutilated diary of Tom Riddle, the air was thick with significance. The diary, once a vessel of an ancient and nearly forgotten evil, lay lifeless in his hands, stabbed through the heart by a basilisk fang. It had been the source of the terrible events that plagued Hogwarts, the attacks, the fear, the near death of students. and yet in the grand tapestry of dark magic, there was a chilling silence about the origins of this artifact. No one, not even Dumbledore, whose brilliance was rarely in question, paused to unravel the path this diary had taken to end up in the hands of a frightened first-year girl. Ginny Weasley, just 11 years old, had spent months pouring her heart into that diary. She had been consumed by it, manipulated, used like a puppet by the lingering soul of Tom Riddle, a shadow of Lord Voldemort. When the truth emerged that the diary had taken control of her, driven her into the depths of the Chamber of Secrets, and nearly caused her death, there was shock, concern, even remorse. But what was sorely lacking was scrutiny. Where had the diary come from? How did it get into Ginny's possession? Why was this dark artifact, saturated with the malevolent magic of a Horcrux, simply accepted as a mystery that didn't need further probing? The answer Ginny could have given wasn't hidden. It wasn't locked in a vault of trauma or tucked behind spells of forgetfulness. She had found the diary in her schoolbooks, bought second-hand at Flourish and Blotts. Specifically, they had come from the Weasleys' attempt to save money. Her parents had purchased her materials from the used section of the bookstore. And that particular pile had been tampered with by Lucius Malfoy, a man who, during that very visit to Diagon Alley, had slipped the diary into Ginny's cauldron under the pretense of removing a book by Muggle-loving Arthur Weasley. Lucius had done it in plain sight, cloaked only by distraction and arrogance. He knew what the diary was. He had carried it for years, perhaps handed down or given by Voldemort himself before his first downfall. It was no mere relic. This was a calculated act, planting a cursed object into the hands of an innocent girl, knowing that it would open the chamber and unleash the terror of Slytherin's monster upon the school. And yet, when the crisis ended and the diary lay inert, no one followed the trail. No one traced the item back to its point of origin. Had anyone questioned Ginny with care, not interrogation, the truth could have unravelled. Where did you get it? An innocent query, a logical first step. She would have remembered the bookstore, the second-hand books, and the way her cauldron felt heavier after that brief encounter with the Malfoys. She might have described the strange man sneering at her father, slipping something into her pile. Even a simple memory of that moment could have led to a deeply troubling conclusion that Lucius Malfoy, one of the most powerful pure-blood wizards in the Ministry, had deliberately placed a cursed object into a child's belongings. This moment was not just overlooked, it was smothered under layers of celebration. The school had survived. Harry had saved Ginny. The Basilisk was dead. The heir of Slytherin, it seemed, had been defeated once again. Everyone was eager to move on. Even Dumbledore, for all his wisdom and far-sightedness, allowed the matter to fade into the background. He commended Harry and acknowledged the bravery of all involved. But he did not ask the one question that would have changed everything. How did the diary get to Ginny? The implications were enormous. If traced, the diary would have served as irrefutable evidence that Voldemort's followers had not disbanded, that they were still active, that they were still plotting. Lucius Malfoy would have been exposed not merely as a former Death Eater, but as someone actively continuing his master's work. The Ministry of Magic, already in denial about Voldemort's return, would have been forced to reckon with a truth it was desperate to avoid. Cornelius Fudge, ever the politician, would not have taken kindly to such a revelation. Instead, the diary became a symbol, not a warning. Dumbledore kept it, studied it perhaps, but never spoke of it publicly. The other teachers, the students, the governors of the school, they accepted the surface explanation that the diary had been a remnant of the past and that past had been laid to rest. But darkness, as it often does in the wizarding world, rarely sleeps for long. The diary was a Horcrux, a fragment of Voldemort's soul. And no one in the story seemed interested in asking who planted it and why. Years later, the answer would come in pieces, as Harry learned about Horcruxes from Dumbledore himself. Only then would the significance of the diary be fully understood. As Dumbledore said in Half-Blood Prince, "Very few people know what Horcruxes are, Harry. I think Voldemort has carefully ensured that knowledge of his immortality is limited." But even without that knowledge, the diary's behavior should have rung alarms loud enough to shake the walls of Hogwarts. It spoke to Ginny, it drained her, it possessed her. No ordinary object does that. And yet the adult world around Harry and Ginny treated it like an unfortunate curiosity. A dangerous thing, yes, but not something that needed to be traced back to its source. The injustice of that silence lingers. Lucius Malfoy walked away unpunished. He returned to his manor, smug and untouched. He continued to move in the upper circles of wizarding society. And Dobby, the house elf who had tried to warn Harry again and again, was freed as a result of a clever trick involving that very diary. But even Dobby's hints, his trembling, terrified warnings, were brushed aside until it was nearly too late. What makes the moment especially strange is that it could have been a turning point. Harry, who already suspected the Malfoys of dark allegiances, would have been vindicated. Dumbledore could have used the evidence to pressure the Ministry, or at least begin laying the groundwork for preparing the magical community for Voldemort's return. Instead, the opportunity slipped through their fingers like sand, and the consequences of that inaction would ripple across the years to come. In Order of the Phoenix, the struggle to prove Voldemort's return becomes a bitter, lonely war. Harry is ridiculed, Dumbledore is isolated, the Ministry wages a campaign of denial. But imagine how different that year would have looked if, 2 years earlier, Lucius Malfoy had been unmasked, if the diary had been traced, if the world had seen a glimpse of what Voldemort had left behind. The silence of Chamber of Secrets wasn't just a missed opportunity, it was a refusal to see the gathering storm. There's a scene in Chamber of Secrets when Dumbledore tells Harry, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities. But perhaps it is also our questions that reveal our wisdom." And in that moment no one asked the right ones. No one chose to look deeper. They accepted survival as enough. They let fear of Voldemort, fear of Malfoy, influence, fear of political consequences, dictate the narrative. The diary was burned, metaphorically and literally. But its echoes remained. Voldemort learned, as did his enemies, but at a terrible cost. Ginny carried the scars, unseen but deep. Harry carried the weight of yet another encounter with evil that went unrecognized by those in power. And the wizarding world continued its slumber, blind to the truth in front of it. The diary didn't just tell a story, it was a message. A message no one cared to read. Number 19. How did everyone avoid direct eye contact with the Basilisk? In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, a deadly creature roams the ancient halls of Hogwarts, the Basilisk. Described as a monstrous serpent with venomous fangs and the lethal power to kill anyone who looks directly into its eyes, the Basilisk is the centerpiece of the book's central mystery. Yet, despite its fearsome nature, no one dies during its reign of terror. Every victim is merely petrified, suspended in a frozen, comatose state. This curious outcome stands at odds with the creature's stated lethality. How is it that time and time again the students of Hogwarts avoid the fatal gaze of the serpent? One could argue it's a series of lucky chances, but when looked at closely, the pattern appears almost too perfect, raising questions about narrative convenience and whether J.K. Rowling compromised realism for the sake of maintaining a child-friendly tone. The first victim of the Basilisk is Argus Filch's cat, Mrs. Norris. Her stiff body is discovered hanging from a torch bracket, eyes wide open, frozen in terror. But instead of being dead, she is petrified. The explanation? She had seen the creature through a reflection in a puddle of water. It's a convenient detail introduced after the fact. The moment is chilling, but the logic begins to unravel when one realizes that Mrs. Norris is an animal. Would a cat understand not to look at the source of a strange, hissing noise. Animals tend to be reactive, instinctive, not careful thinkers. For her to accidentally look into the water at the exact moment the basilisk passes by stretches believability. The narrative demands we accept that a cat behaved with uncanny, human-like precision to avoid death. Colin Creevey, the second victim, adds another peculiar layer. The young Gryffindor, ever eager to photograph Harry, is found petrified, with his camera melted. The explanation offered is that Colin saw the basilisk through his camera lens. But this raises two problems. Firstly, camera lenses are made of glass and the eye passes through them much like it does through glasses. Secondly, Colin wasn't simply snapping a candid shot. He was actively looking through the viewfinder. That means he was attempting to focus on what he saw, aligning the lens with his own eyes. Is it really plausible that such a specific layer of glass would dilute the deadly power of the basilisk's stare? Rowling never offers an explanation for why a camera viewfinder, unlike regular eyeglasses, blocks the creature's fatal magic. The third victim, Justin Finch-Fletchley, is spared by another narrative twist. At the time of his encounter, Justin happens to be standing near nearly headless Nick. The ghost absorbs the full brunt of the basilisk's gaze, becoming a floating, grey, petrified spectre, and Justin sees only the indirect gaze through the ghost's semi-transparent form. Once again, a bizarre buffer exists between victim and serpent. The basilisk manages to approach a corridor full of students, yet coincidentally only makes visual contact through an intermediary that diffuses its deadly glance. Considering the creature is large and supposed to be hunting, how does it always find the most convoluted ways to look at its victims? Then there's Hermione Granger, whose fate adds both brilliance and frustration. Hermione, always the clever one, realizes what is attacking students before anyone else. Instead of alerting a teacher, she races to the library, puts two and two together, and scribbles the word basilisk on a scrap of paper. When she's found, she's clutching a small mirror and has also been petrified. The implication is clear. She saw the creature in the mirror's reflection. But why was she carrying a mirror around the school in the first place, and how did she manage to lift it at the exact right moment? It's another astonishing stroke of luck, made even more unbelievable when we consider how enormous the basilisk is. Wouldn't its reflection fill the mirror entirely? Could even a glimpse in the corner be enough to kill? Rowling never clarifies the mechanism by which the death glare works in reflections, leaving the reader to speculate about vague magical rules that are never formally introduced. The ghost nearly headless. Nick being petrified at all is another strange choice. A ghost, by definition, is not a living thing, so how can it be affected by the death stare of a living creature that preys on life itself? The idea that a ghost can be paralyzed suggests that the basilisk's powers extend beyond the physical into the spiritual. This has massive implications, yet it is never addressed again in the series. If a basilisk can petrify a ghost, what other magical laws can it bypass? Does its power exist on a different plane? The text doesn't offer any commentary. We are asked to believe that a creature designed to be unstoppable just happened to only cause non-lethal damage every time it struck. One of the most questionable aspects of the entire sequence is the sheer number of narrow escapes. Each petrified victim is a product of freak circumstance, but when multiple freak accidents occur in succession, the randomness becomes suspicious. Is Hogwarts really that lucky? Or is the basilisk simply incompetent? It is described in the book as a creature bred to kill with a single glance, and it has centuries of myth behind it. Yet the one unleashed on the castle appears oddly inefficient. It slithers through corridors with the stealth of a trained predator, but fails to meet its deadly potential every single time. Either the basilisk has an impeccable sense of timing and angle, or its attacks are sabotaged by narrative design. Harry's own encounter with the basilisk in the chamber is the only moment when the creature comes close to fulfilling its deadly function. But even then, the situation is blunted. Harry avoids the fatal gaze because Fawkes the Phoenix blinds the serpent by scratching out its eyes. Suddenly, the most terrifying threat in the book is reduced to a blind monster fighting in darkness. The suspense dissolves and the danger becomes manageable. The eye gaze, once the most feared aspect of the basilisk, is completely removed from the climax. It's an unsatisfying payoff to the build-up that preceded it. A creature that could kill with a glance is defeated not through bravery or cunning, but by literal blindness. It's worth noting that the basilisk's behavior during its rampage is strangely restrained. Tom Riddle uses it to target Muggle-borns, but he does not instruct it to kill anyone. In fact, Riddle tells Harry that the creature obeys only him. This suggests that the basilisk is capable of killing, but perhaps Riddle is deliberately limiting its destruction to avoid drawing too much attention. But even this doesn't hold up to scrutiny. Why petrify? Why not simply murder and be done with it? Wouldn't the deaths send a stronger message about blood purity? The narrative insists on the threat of death without ever crossing the line into actual mortality. This odd restraint becomes even more glaring when considering the setting, a magical boarding school filled with children. The book makes it clear that the Chamber of Secrets had remained hidden for centuries. Its very legend is rooted in the fear that the monster within would purge Hogwarts of Muggle-born students. Yet when the chamber is finally opened, the result is strangely mild. No casualties, just a handful of students frozen in time, recoverable with a potion brewed from mandrakes. The plot builds enormous tension around a supposedly lethal monster, but the outcomes feel sanitized. The disparity between the basilisk's reputation and its actual effect undermines the stakes of the story. Readers are told that the creature is fatal, that its very eyes are weapons of instant death, but every single attack includes a convenient buffer, a puddle, a camera, a mirror, a ghost. It feels as though Rowling wanted to flirt with real danger but backed away from the consequences. There's a disconnect between the horror promised and the resolution delivered. What could have been a terrifying force of destruction ends up as an elaborate mechanism for suspense without payoff. The basilisk is talked about in reverent, fearful tones, but behaves more like a misfiring security system than a true monster. Its appearances are cloaked in darkness and slithering sounds, but the results are always non-lethal. It is a threat in theory, never in practice. Even its final defeat at the hands of a second-year student with a sword and phoenix feels symbolically empty. It was never given the chance to be what it claimed to be. Ultimately, the decision to petrify instead of kill seems to have been made to preserve the book's tone. The Chamber of Secrets is a children's novel, and Rowling may have feared that actual deaths would alienate readers or parents, but in doing so she inadvertently weakened the creature's credibility. The basilisk, one of the most hyped threats in the entire series, fails to kill even a single person. This has the effect of making its menace feel artificial, more bark than bite. Even Albus Dumbledore remarks on the seriousness of the attacks, yet his actions never align with the idea that students are truly at risk of death. The school is not evacuated, no aurors are called. The administration proceeds cautiously, but never with the alarm that one might expect when a killer serpent is stalking hallways. Dumbledore's calm demeanour perhaps reflects Rowling's own reluctance to let the narrative go too far into darkness. The sense of real danger is always muted. In hindsight, the events of the Chamber of Secrets read less like a tragedy narrowly avoided and more like a puzzle designed to maintain suspense without delivering real consequences. Every petrification becomes a plot device, not an emotional blow. The absence of death may have kept the book suitable for its intended audience, but it left behind a lingering inconsistency, a monster that was supposed to be death incarnate but could barely land a hit. Number 20. How did Ginny enter the chamber without Parseltongue? The events surrounding Ginny Weasley's descent into the Chamber of Secrets have always raised questions that are often overlooked in the fast-paced storytelling of J.K. Rowling's second installment. Ginny, a first-year student barely 12 years old, is revealed at the end of the book, to have been under the influence of Tom Riddle's diary. But the logistics of how she repeatedly entered the Chamber of Secrets remain suspiciously vague. The very entrance to the chamber requires the rare ability to speak Parseltongue, the language of snakes, and is hidden inside a sink in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. Only someone fluent in Parseltongue could speak the words to open it. And yet, Ginny not only managed to enter but did so multiple times without anyone catching her. It is repeatedly emphasized in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets that the entrance to the chamber is virtually unknown to anyone. When Harry finally finds it, it's by following the trail of clues and eventually speaking Parseltongue to a carved serpent on the tap, something he only realizes after multiple hints. But Ginny, a shy, inexperienced girl from a wizarding family, could not have known this entrance existed, let alone activated it. Yet she somehow not only opened it, but went far enough to release the Basilisk, scrawl threatening messages on the walls in blood, and finally end up in the chamber herself, unconscious, near death. This raises a deeply puzzling question. If Ginny couldn't speak Parseltongue, how did she get in? Tom Riddle's diary is said to have possessed her. That much is clear. But possession in the wizarding world is often shown as a temporary state, not one that grants a person new magical abilities. There's no canonical example of possession enabling someone to speak a language they do not know. And even if we accept that Riddle's influence allowed her to mimic Parseltongue unconsciously, why did no one, not even Moaning Myrtle, who haunts the exact location of the entrance, notice her entering the chamber time and again? The bathroom is described as frequently empty but not abandoned. Myrtle complains constantly about being disturbed, yet Ginny was never caught. Even more curious is that Argus Filch, the ever-watchful caretaker of Hogwarts, was known for lurking in the corridors and catching students in places they shouldn't be. He was particularly obsessed with finding whoever was writing messages in blood and attacking students. The girls' bathroom on the second floor, being the site of multiple messages, would have been under increased scrutiny. And still, Ginny, barely 4 feet tall and terrified of her own secret activities, was somehow able to sneak into the bathroom, speak Parseltongue, or simulate it, and vanish into the chamber without leaving a trace, more than once. When Harry and Ron discover the entrance, they only find it after Hermione is petrified, and even then they need help from Aragog, the Forbidden Forest, and eventually the written note clutched in Hermione's hand. Once in the bathroom, Harry must speak Parseltongue to a carved serpent tap to open the sink, revealing a massive tunnel. Then he must physically slide down a long, dangerous pipe to reach the chamber. This pipe is not a staircase, it's a steep, slippery, vertical drop. How did Ginny, a first year, manage this? Was she dragged? Did she go willingly? And how did she get back up, assuming she returned after some of the earlier attacks? Riddle's memory claims to have manipulated her into doing everything. She poured out her soul to me, and her soul happened to be exactly what I needed. But the mechanics of how this occurred aren't explained. Ginny was clearly unaware of what she was doing most of the time. She claims she would wake up with blood on her robes, suggesting some kind of blackout or trance. But that does not answer the physical logistics. If Tom Riddle, through the diary, possessed her to the point of controlling her body completely, that implies a level of magical domination rarely seen elsewhere in the series. Even Barty Crouch Jr., under the influence of Polyjuice potion while impersonating Mad-Eye Moody in the 4th book, could not act entirely undetected, and he was an adult Death Eater with years of experience. Yet Ginny, under Riddle's control, was able to slither around the school, enter forbidden areas, handle a magical snake, and write with blood on walls, all without so much as a whisper of suspicion until the very end. No portrait saw her, no ghost, not even Peeves, noticed her. Not even Dumbledore, the greatest wizard of the age, who could detect traces of dark magic and sensed Harry's connection to Voldemort, had any clue what was happening. Additionally, Hogwarts is known to be enchanted with powerful protective and observatory magic. The Marauder's map, for example, shows everyone's location in the castle. Granted, Fred and George Weasley had it during this time and may not have been monitoring their sister, but the map's very existence proves that movement within the school is traceable. Furthermore, magical wards and enchantments, including those likely set up by Dumbledore, would presumably raise alerts if a first-year student were disappearing for hours into an ancient, cursed part of the school. But Hogwarts remained silent. Another strange inconsistency is the complete absence of any physical aftermath. When Harry opens the chamber and returns with Ginny, there's no indication of the smell, the slime, the detritus of dark magic. Nothing that suggests someone had been down there many times before. The chamber looks undisturbed, ancient, untouched. And yet Ginny had apparently been there repeatedly, even long before she fell unconscious. No discarded clothing, no remnants of prior visits, not even disturbed dust on the floor. It's as if she was never there, until the final time. Moreover, when the Basilisk attacked Colin Creevey, Justin Finch-Fletchley, nearly Headless Nick and others, the attacks occurred all over the castle. Yet no one questioned how the creature moved unseen from the hidden chamber into the school halls. Ginny, or rather Tom Riddle, through her, would have had to release the Basilisk, give it commands, and then return to the chamber to hide it again. This would require near-constant access to the bathroom and complete freedom of movement through the school's labyrinthine structure. It seems incredibly unlikely that a single student, especially a new one, unfamiliar with the layout, could manage this. And there's Myrtle herself, moaning. Myrtle died from looking into the Basilisk's eyes. She was a victim of the original chamber attacks and is permanently tied to the location. Yet even she, who floats endlessly in her bathroom, did not recognize the events repeating themselves. She heard no Parseltongue, saw no movement, witnessed no terrified red-haired girl descending through her sink. It's possible that Riddle used magic to silence these moments, or that Ginny moved while Myrtle was absent. But considering Myrtle's obsessive presence, even that seems a stretch. It is also worth noting that no teachers investigated the bathroom more closely after the second or third attack. Given that the first messages in blood appeared near that very spot, it would make sense for Dumbledore or McGonagall to conduct magical scans, track traces of enchantments, or question Myrtle more thoroughly. But nothing of the sort is described. The entire bathroom is left unchecked. For months, it takes the near death of Ginny for anyone to consider it relevant. One might argue that Tom Riddle, being a powerful magical entity even in diary form, cloaked Ginny in dark enchantments that made her invisible or silenced her presence. But such magic that erases not only sound but memory, scent, traces of movement is never shown to exist elsewhere in the series. And if Riddle had such powers, why use a first-year girl at all? Why not take control of someone older, stronger, more capable of understanding his demands? In the end, the convenience of Ginny's repeated visits to the chamber and her undetected activity remains one of the most logically flawed moments in the entire saga. It stretches the limits of believability that not one adult, ghost, teacher, student, or magical mechanism noticed what was happening. Dumbledore's famous quote, "Help will always be given at Hogwarts to those who ask for it," rings hollow when a young girl was suffering in silence, under possession, committing magical crimes in a school brimming with protective magic. No help came. No one asked the right questions. No one even looked in the right place. Thus, Ginny's descent into the Chamber of Secrets stands not just as a plot point in a thrilling story, but as a strangely glossed-over sequence that collapses under scrutiny. The ease with which she enters an ancient chamber, unleashes a deadly monster, and evades every layer of security at Hogwarts suggests either a stunning oversight or a deeper flaw in the magical world's understanding of possession and surveillance. Whatever the explanation, the truth remains unsettling. No one noticed, and that silence nearly cost a young girl her life. Number 21. Gilderoy Lockhart's very convenient amnesia. Gilderoy Lockhart stood as a monument to charm and self-promotion, a celebrity among wizards, dazzling the wizarding world with tales of bravery and brilliance. From wanderings with werewolves to holidays with hags, his books filled shelves, boasting miraculous feats and impossible victories. The reality, however, was much darker and simpler. Lockhart stole the stories of others and modified their memories so they would forget ever having lived them. This required, above all else, precise, practiced skill in memory charms. He didn't just cast them, he relied on them, built his entire life upon them. Yet when it came to the fateful moment in the Chamber of Secrets, this self-proclaimed master of memory magic failed catastrophically. The charm backfired, exploded in his hands, and left him hollow, babbling and blank-eyed in a hospital ward. It was not simply ironic, it was suspicious. The spell Lockhart attempted to cast on Harry and Ron was obliviate. As he declared dramatically, "The adventure ends here, boys." He raised Ron's broken wand, uttered the incantation, and vanished in a swirl of dust and confusion. The spell didn't just fail, it reversed with such violent force that Lockhart's mind was completely erased. He was left unable to recognize his own name, his former occupation, or even basic facts about his identity. In Order of the Phoenix, years later, he was still a patient in the Janus Thicky ward at St. Mungo's Hospital, signing autographs with no understanding of who he truly was. Such a result from a single failed spell demands scrutiny. For a man who had successfully modified the memories of powerful witches and wizards and covered his tracks with precision for years, this level of self-destruction seems wildly disproportionate. Lockhart had boasted many times that memory charms were his specialty. In Chamber of Secrets, he tells Harry with smug confidence, "It's lucky for me that I know memory charms so well, otherwise you'd remember that little accident with the pixies." And in a telling scene, Professor McGonagall herself says, "Gilderoy Lockhart is the only man for the job, not because of his talents, but because of his fame." Yet even Dumbledore, usually more discerning, saw value in Lockhart's proclaimed expertise with Obliviate. It stands to reason that Lockhart had successfully modified multiple memories over the years without detection. In fact, the victims of his magical theft had no idea they had been wronged. He travelled the world, extracting glorious tales from unassuming heroes, and then sent them into forgetfulness with a flick of his wand. How could a wizard capable of that fumble so disastrously at the critical moment? The answer may lie in the wand. Ron's wand, broken earlier in the Whomping Willow incident, was held together with spellotape and was notoriously unreliable. It had backfired before, as when Ron accidentally cursed himself to vomit slugs. But here's the contradiction. If Lockhart was truly a master of magical theory, wouldn't he recognize the danger of casting a complex charm like Obliviate with a faulty wand? Lockhart wasn't under threat at that moment. Harry and Ron were still unarmed, and he had the upper hand. He had time to analyze the situation. His arrogance may have blinded him, but such a basic magical mistake from a supposed expert strains belief. It points not to hubris, but to ignorance. In that sense, Lockhart was not merely a fraud in character, he was also a fraud in magic. He had learned the memory charm not as a creator or innovator, but as a parrot. He could mimic the spell, copy it, repeat it enough times to make it work. But his understanding of the deeper mechanisms of the spell was surface level at best. When asked to perform the spell under irregular conditions, like using a wand that didn't belong to him, or worse, a wand that was broken, his lack of real magical comprehension was exposed. This wasn't just a slip in judgment, it was a revelation of how fragile his house of cards truly was. Lockhart's victims had always been passive. They had been caught unaware, perhaps even grateful at first to speak to a charming, interested traveller asking about their past. Lockhart struck with stealth, performed the charm cleanly, and never had to deal with resistance. In contrast, Harry and Ron were not passive. They confronted him, challenged him, forced him into action. This environment, one of panic and urgency, was new to Lockhart. His magic was never tested under pressure. When he tried to perform the memory charm on them, it was perhaps the first time he had ever done so without complete control of the circumstances. That pressure, combined with the faulty wand and his own magical shallowness, created a perfect storm for disaster. Moreover, the consequences were permanent. Lockhart's mind was not simply scrambled, it was erased. He doesn't know who he is anymore, the healer tells them in Order of the Phoenix. He still thinks he's famous. This was not a temporary misfire, it was a total neural collapse. Considering how memory charms work in other cases, such as Bertha Jorkins in Goblet of Fire, whose memory was damaged but not entirely destroyed, Lockhart's case is extreme. This supports the theory that the backfire was not just a fluke. It was the exposure of magical incompetence, so complete that the very spell he tried to wield became a weapon against him. Dumbledore, ever the observer, seems to understand this. He never attempts to reverse Lockhart's condition, nor does he speak in his defense. It is as though he recognizes that Lockhart's fate is poetic justice, the natural result of deception meeting reality. There is no mention of Lockhart's attempt being studied, no magical inquiry into the cause of the backfire. This silence implies that the magical community accepted the outcome as fitting. He had built his career on erasing others. Now, his own identity had been erased. The wand was simply the final nudge. Yet the mystery remains. If Lockhart truly created or perfected a memory charm, which many assumed from his success, why would he rely on a standard spell like Obliviate? Wizards capable of crafting original magic often give their spells unique properties, names, or even protections. But Lockhart shows no sign of that. His work was derivative. He used standard magic in standard ways and didn't truly innovate. Even his books are retellings, stitched together from the lives of those he victimized. This reinforces the idea that his magical talent was less than he claimed. In retrospect, his failure serves as a commentary on the nature of magical expertise. In the wizarding world, reputation often trumps reality. Lockhart succeeded not because of his skill, but because of his branding. He was charming, presentable, articulate, and popular. His books sold, he gave lectures, he posed for photographs with dazzling teeth and perfect hair. Yet when he was called to truly act as a wizard in a situation that required courage, competence, and clarity, he failed, spectacularly. The broken wand was only the match. The real fuel was Lockhart's hollow understanding of the magic he pretended to master. That his spell failed with such explosiveness is a narrative punctuation mark. Memory charms are notoriously delicate. They must be precisely targeted, correctly measured, and subtly cast. A tiny miscalculation can cause permanent damage. But in all previous cases, Lockhart had time, privacy, and compliant targets. He operated like a surgeon working on unconscious patients. In the chamber, however, he was more like an amateur wielding a scalpel during an earthquake. That difference, the loss of control, revealed how little he truly knew. Even Madame Pomfrey, who had seen countless magical mishaps, was baffled by the extent of Lockhart's condition. His mind didn't just forget events, it deleted context. He was amiable, even cheerful, but fundamentally disconnected, a man-shaped shadow of the celebrity he had once pretended to be. This haunting outcome calls into question not only his ability, but the structure of magical education and accountability in general. How could someone like Lockhart pass through Hogwarts, gain fame, and receive teaching appointments without ever proving his skills? The story of Gilderoy Lockhart is more than comic relief or moral comeuppance. It is a study in magical illusion, not of spells, but of reputation. His undoing was not the fault of Ron's wand or random chance. It was the inevitable collapse of a false narrative. He did not understand the magic he claimed to master. He was not a creator of memory spells. He was a thief with a pretty face, undone by the first challenge he couldn't talk his way out of. In the end, the true magic wasn't obliviate. It was the power of truth to finally reveal what had always been hidden behind his smile. Number 22. Why is brewing dangerous potions not a problem? In the cold, dim corridors of Hogwarts, danger always lurked in the shadows, but sometimes it brewed quietly in a cauldron, hidden behind the facade of good intentions. When Harry Potter and his friends secretly brewed Polyjuice potion in their second year, the consequences should have echoed through the school like a blast from a cannon. Yet what followed was eerie silence. A flooded bathroom, a girl in the hospital wing with fur and a tail, and two boys who illegally impersonated their classmates, all brushed aside with barely a raised eyebrow from any authority. The brewing of one of the most dangerous potions known in the magical world was not met with expulsion, not even with detention. And so the question lingers in the murky waters beneath the castle. Why isn't unauthorized potion-making banned, or at least controlled? The Polyjuice potion is not a simple concoction of herbs and charm. It is complex, demanding a month-long brewing period, rare and expensive ingredients, and utmost precision. According to Moster Potente Potions, the book Hermione stole from the restricted section, mistakes can lead to horrifying consequences, and they did. Hermione, perhaps the brightest witch of her age, misidentified a hair from Millicent Bulstrode's robes, thinking it belonged to the girl. Instead, it came from her cat. The result was grotesque. Her face was covered in black fur, her eyes had turned yellow, and there were long, pointed ears poking through her hair. Chamber of Secrets, Chapter 12. That wasn't just an accident, it was a near miss with magical catastrophe, and still, not one professor acted to enforce discipline. Hogwarts, as a school, houses hundreds of children, many of whom are impulsive, curious, and untrained. Allowing unrestricted access to books detailing such potions without any safeguard in place is a profound risk. The trio brewed Polyjuice in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, a place far from the watchful eyes of any adult. They used stolen ingredients, boomslang skin and bicorn horn, from Professor Snape's private stores. The theft alone should have raised alarms. Snape even voiced his suspicion. Someone has been stealing from my private stores. Yet beyond casting doubt, he did nothing. No investigation followed, no interrogation, no protective measures to prevent further misuse. The lack of response is more than oversight. It borders on negligence. What's more troubling is the message it sends. If 3 second-year students can, with some effort and secrecy, brew an advanced potion like Polyjuice, what is stopping others from attempting the same, or worse? Fred and George Weasley, for instance, are renowned for their mischief and creativity. Their talents in concocting prank products are celebrated later through Weasley's Wizard Wheezes. If Harry, Ron, and Hermione could manage the potion in secret, why didn't Fred and George ever brew something far more disruptive, like a true love potion with permanent effects, or a dangerous draught of living death? The implication is that they could have, at any time. But they didn't. Not because it was impossible, but perhaps because the story didn't call for it, or because they weren't willing to push boundaries that far. But the fact remains, they could have. The Polyjuice episode reveals a chasm in Hogwarts safety protocols. Potion making is inherently dangerous. A single wrong step can cause explosive reactions, mental instability, or transformation mishaps. In a controlled classroom, with a professor like Snape breathing down students' necks, mistakes are still common. Neville Longbottom's numerous failures in potions proved just how easily things can go wrong, even under supervision. Outside that environment where no adult is present and the ingredients are self-gathered or stolen, the risk is multiplied. Yet Hogwarts has no wards preventing unauthorized brewing, no surveillance in place to detect magical activity in unused rooms, no magical safeguards to alert staff when restricted ingredients are accessed. It is as though the school simply trusts its students not to cross the line, a trust that, time and again, proves naive. Hermione's transformation into a cat is not just comic relief, it is a cautionary tale ignored by everyone. She spent weeks in the hospital wing under Madame Pomfrey's care. And while her recovery was quick, it underscores how easily a worse outcome could have occurred. A more dangerous mistake might have led to permanent disfigurement, magical poisoning, or even death. Yet Dumbledore remained silent. McGonagall, usually stern and rule-abiding, never issued punishment. Snape, whose ingredients were stolen and whose pride was wounded, voiced suspicion but took no action. The adults watched the storm pass and moved on as though nothing had happened. This passive response is more alarming when one considers the content of the potion. Polyjuice is not used for benign reasons. It is a tool of deception, espionage, and manipulation. It allows the user to impersonate another person perfectly for an hour at a time. In the wrong hands, it could be used to infiltrate restricted areas, steal secrets, or even commit crimes while hidden behind another's identity. And yet Hogwarts staff treated the misuse of such a potion by 3 unsupervised minors as a minor transgression, an act of curiosity gone awry, rather than the dangerous violation it was. What if it hadn't been Harry and Ron? What if it had been Draco Malfoy brewing Polyjuice to impersonate a prefect and sneak into the Gryffindor common room? Or worse, what if a group of older students decided to brew something more dangerous, like a potion that incites madness or compels truth-telling against one's will? The consequences could be catastrophic. Hogwarts sits on a precipice of magical irresponsibility, shielded only by the good fortune that its students, most of the time, don't go too far. Moreover, the access to ingredients itself is a gaping flaw in the school's structure. That boomslang skin and bicorn horn was stolen from Snape's stores should have triggered a lockdown of some kind. These are not ingredients for simple household potions. They are rare and potent. The very fact that Hermione knew their value and location hints at how porous Hogwarts' security really is. The restricted section of the library, too, seems laughably easy to access. A simple note from a professor opens the gate to the darkest recipes in wizardkind, and even that safeguard is circumvented by invisibility cloaks and a bit of clever thinking. If such lapses existed in the real world, they would be deemed criminally negligent. Imagine a chemistry lab where students could steal hydrofluoric acid and potassium cyanide without detection, brew it in a school bathroom, and accidentally cause injury, only for the teachers to shrug. That's precisely what happened at Hogwarts, only the chemicals had magical names and side effects. Some may argue that the trio's actions, while illegal, were noble. They suspected Draco Malfoy of being the heir of Slytherin and wanted to uncover the truth. But noble intent does not negate recklessness. Breaking rules, stealing and brewing illegal potions are still offences regardless of motive. It is the job of educators to uphold boundaries, not just for punishment, but to teach students that actions have consequences. In the absence of those consequences, what lesson did Harry and his friends learn? That rules bend for heroes, that ends justify means? It is worth noting that Hermione Granger, after the Polyjuice incident, does not seem to face any ethical reckoning. Her obsessive reliance on rule-following is curiously suspended during this moment, only to resume immediately after. This inconsistency speaks to a broader flaw in the narrative, the double standard applied to protagonists. If another student, say Pansy Parkinson, had brewed Polyjuice and turned herself into McGonagall, the punishment would likely have been swift and severe. But because it was Hermione, the narrative permits the breach without correction. The lack of control over potion-making also opens dark possibilities for the future. If Hogwarts alumni remember that they could get away with such experimentation, what prevents them from continuing such behavior in adulthood unchecked? The seeds of disregard for magical law are planted early, in the very place where discipline should be sacred. and while Dumbledore may trust in the ultimate goodness of his students, not all are worthy of that trust. Even more unsettling is how this moment foreshadows darker abuses of Polyjuice potion later in the series. Barty Crouch Jr. uses it in Goblet of Fire to impersonate Mad-Eye Moody, committing a year-long deception that nearly kills Harry. The same potion Harry brewed at 12 became a tool for Death Eaters and traitors. If that doesn't prove how dangerous it is, nothing will. And it all began with a flooded bathroom and a cat-faced girl. Hogwarts may be the safest place in the wizarding world, as Hagrid claims, but safety without control is illusion. When students can quietly create potions capable of transforming identities, manipulating emotions, or damaging minds, and receive no more than a whispered warning, the foundation of that safety begins to crumble. The silence that followed the Polyjuice incident wasn't mercy, it was failure. And if anyone had truly been hurt, there would have been no one to blame but those who should have been watching. Number 23. How did Fawkes carry everyone out of the chamber? In the dim, echoing silence of the Chamber of Secrets, after the furious battle with the Basilisk, something miraculous happened, something that on the surface felt heroic, magical, and undeniably cinematic. Harry Potter, bleeding and poisoned, clutching the ruined diary of Tom Riddle, stood over the unconscious body of Ginny Weasley. The danger had passed, but the question loomed. How would they get out of the chamber buried deep beneath Hogwarts? The answer arrived in the form of Fawkes, Albus Dumbledore's loyal phoenix. He had appeared earlier, bringing the sorting hat, and had healed Harry's fatal wound with his tears. But the most puzzling act was still to come. With apparent ease, Fawkes carried not only Harry and Ginny out of the chamber, but also Ron Weasley and Gilderoy Lockhart. The logistics of this escape stretched the boundaries of even magical believability. The Phoenix is, without question, a magical creature of rare power. Described in the book as a scarlet bird the size of a swan, Fawkes possesses extraordinary abilities. He can carry heavy loads, his song encourages courage, and his tears heal wounds. But even with all of that, Rowling never clarifies exactly how this creature managed to lift at least 4 humans, one of them unconscious and one of them carrying a sword. Ginny had collapsed, Harry was still weak from basilisk venom, and Ron was on edge after the cave-in that had separated him from the others. Lockhart, affected by his own memory charm, had no idea where he even was, and yet Fawkes is said to have taken them all out. The simplicity with which the scene is described masks the underlying absurdity of what actually happens. The book tells us Fawkes was hovering in the chamber, his talons gripping the top of the hat. He dropped it, and it landed with a loud clatter next to Harry. Later, after Ginny wakes, we read, "Fawkes was waiting for them," still singing softly. Harry climbed onto the back of the Phoenix, clutching the diary and the sword, and Ginny clambered up behind him. Fawkes rose into the air and soared out of the chamber with them. Not a word is given to how Ron and Lockhart made it up. It's simply written, they found Ron and Lockhart standing awkwardly at the end of the tunnel. And then, somehow, they're all out. It's one of those rare moments in the series where the rulebook of Rowling's universe seems to bend to narrative convenience. The idea of a bird, even a magical one, carrying 2, 3, or 4 people at once isn't just unrealistic. It breaks the internal logic that the series otherwise carefully maintains. The weight of Harry and Ginny alone would be considerable. Add in Ron, who is lanky and tall, and Lockhart, a full-grown man, and the load becomes ridiculous. Fawkes is never described as increasing in size, nor is any spell mentioned that might assist in this effort. The bird simply flies them out as if sheer loyalty and magical purity could defy gravity. Some might argue that Fawkes didn't fly them physically in the traditional sense, but instead used a magical form of teleportation. And yes, phoenixes are described elsewhere in the series as capable of disapparating in a burst of flame, taking people with them, but that is never described or mentioned in the Chamber of Secrets. Fawkes is seen soaring upwards with them on his back. No fire, no teleportation, just wings and feathers. This discrepancy makes the scene harder to accept. If this escape had been a flame travel, that would have at least aligned with what we later learn in the Order of the Phoenix when Fawkes escapes with Dumbledore during a Ministry ambush, but in Chamber, no such thing happens. The sword of Godric Gryffindor adds another weight to this conundrum. Harry emerges from the chamber not only weakened and wounded, but carrying a weapon made of goblin-wrought silver and rubies. That's not a light souvenir. And yet the text treats this evacuation as if it's nothing more than a simple ascent. It's the literary equivalent of cutting to black and assuming the audience won't ask how the magic trick was pulled off. In a world as carefully constructed as Rowling's, this is jarring. Moreover, Ginny had been unconscious for a long time, drained by the diary and the influence of Tom Riddle. Even when she awoke, she was weak, frightened, and likely still under residual effects of dark magic. Would she have been strong enough to cling to a bird in flight? Would Harry, barely recovered from the venom, have had the strength to hold both the diary and the sword while maintaining balance? And where did Ron and Lockhart go during this time? Were they standing by and watching, waiting for their turn? Even more curious is that none of the characters question the logistics afterward. In a series where Harry frequently dwells on unanswered questions, where Hermione demands clarification, and Ron is quick to point out absurdities, no one asks, wait, how did Fawkes carry us all out of there? The event is swallowed up by the excitement of Ginny's survival and the defeat of the Basilisk. And that's perhaps the most telling sign that the author didn't want us to look too closely. It was meant to be felt, not questioned. It's important to note that this isn't an isolated inconsistency in the series, but it's one of the most visually dramatic ones. The final sequence in the chamber has all the elements of myth. The hero conquers the beast, retrieves the relic, and is lifted out by a divine creature. It echoes stories of Greek mythology, Perseus or Theseus returning from the underworld. But unlike those ancient tales, the Harry Potter series was built with a more modern commitment to internal coherence. Magic in Rowling's world isn't limitless. It has costs, boundaries, and consequences. Apparition requires practice. Time travel needs devices. Levitation spells are limited in force, but here none of that seems to matter. One could also look at this moment as an early sign of narrative flexibility that Rowling sometimes allowed when the plot needed a swift exit. Later in the series, such conveniences become rarer. Characters must earn their way out of danger using cleverness, training, or sacrifice. In Chamber, Harry's bravery and Fawkes' loyalty are enough, but in retrospect this feels like a narrative shortcut, one that glosses over the real physical limitations of the situation. Fawkes himself is a symbol of resurrection, loyalty, and divine intervention. Perhaps Rowling intended for this moment to be miraculous, and miracles, by nature, defy reason. But even within magical storytelling, miracles tend to carry a cost or leave behind ripples of confusion. In this case, everyone accepts the Phoenix's feat without pause, which cheapens the stakes they just faced. There's no lingering awe, no whispered wonder at how such a bird could accomplish such a thing. The reader is asked to suspend disbelief not in the presence of magic itself, but in the misuse of that magic. It's not the idea that a phoenix is powerful, it's that its powers are used in a vague, unchallenged way that creates a gap in storytelling consistency. In every great story, even magic has its rules. When those rules are bent for the sake of spectacle, the illusion starts to break. And here, in the depths of the chamber, as they rise on wings of red and gold, the illusion trembles. It's especially odd considering how meticulously Rowling sets up the rules of other magical phenomena. The time turner, the invisibility cloak, Polyjuice potion, all are explained in detail with clear limitations. Readers are taught to think critically about magic in this world, yet here At a crucial turning point, we are given only feathers and hope. No one asks how they got out because the story doesn't want us to. It's worth remembering that the tunnel to the chamber had collapsed. Ron says, "The tunnel's caved in," and this adds a new layer of implausibility. If the path they entered through was blocked, how exactly did Fawkes get in? And more importantly, how did he get out with all of them? Did he create a new tunnel? Did he fly straight up through solid rock? The lack of explanation is deafening. For a world where staircases move but dungeons are solid stone, this escape feels lazy. Ultimately, the scene is beautiful but brittle. The triumph of saving Ginny, the poetic justice of destroying the diary, the symbolism of the phoenix, they all land emotionally, but they come at the cost of logic, and for a series that usually holds itself to a higher standard of consistency, that's a shame. The reader may not notice the first time, swept up in the heroism. Number 24, why didn't the ghosts help? Sir Nicholas de Mimsy-Porpington floated solemnly through the castle, his head slightly askew, bound to his translucent collar with the silvery mist of undeath. He was one of many ghosts in Hogwarts, each with the freedom to drift through walls, glide through locked doors, and observe the inner workings of the school unseen. Yet when terror gripped the stone halls during Harry Potter's second year, as students began to turn up petrified, and the whispers of the air of Slytherin chilled every corridor, none of the castle's spectral inhabitants lifted so much as a ghostly finger to help. It is a baffling oversight in the otherwise rich and methodical world that J.K. Rowling crafted. Hogwarts was under siege from within, yet those best equipped to see what others could not remained curiously passive. The ghosts, unlike the living, are not bound by physical limitations. They do not need sleep, cannot be harmed by the Basilisk's stare, and can traverse every inch of the castle, from the forbidden dungeons to the highest towers. One would expect, at the very least, that the staff would call on them for assistance when the first student was petrified. But when Mrs. Norris was found stiff as stone, dangling from a torch bracket, not one ghost came forward to report anything suspicious. Even the ghosts who frequently roam the halls, nearly headless. Nick, the fat friar, the bloody baron, remained silent. These are beings who can pass through walls and eavesdrop on every conversation. Their inaction becomes even stranger when we remember that Hogwarts was in a state of emergency. Professor Binns, the only ghost to teach a class, was perhaps the most obvious candidate for involvement. As the history of magic professor, he had vast knowledge of Hogwarts' past, including the legends surrounding the Chamber of Secrets. When Hermione, Harry and Ron asked him about the myth, he reluctantly explained it, but only after first insisting, "There is no Chamber of Secrets, there is no monster." Despite his wealth of knowledge, Binns dismissed their questions as childish curiosity. Even as the danger escalated, he made no move to research further or monitor areas known for historic magical disturbances. For someone who has taught centuries of students and resides permanently in the school, his detachment from the crisis feels unjustifiably indifferent. The Bloody Baron, who rarely speaks, is known to have significant authority over the other ghosts. His deep connection with Slytherin House and his intimidating presence make him an ideal figure to investigate secrets possibly tied to Salazar Slytherin himself. But the Baron remained as mute and invisible during the crisis as the petrified students lying in the hospital wing. His silence is especially suspicious given his unique ability to roam unnoticed and unchallenged by anyone, even Peeves, the poltergeist. Surely if a creature were stalking the school, emerging from pipes and slithering through shadows, the Bloody Baron would have heard or seen something, or at least been tasked with watching. The dungeons? Then there's the Grey Lady, Helena Ravenclaw, who knows the secrets of hidden passageways and haunted corners. She carries the burden of the diadem's theft and the knowledge of places in the castle forgotten even by the living. Though she plays a more prominent role in Deathly Hallows, her existence in Chamber of Secrets is never acknowledged, even while the school is on high alert. One might imagine that a ghost so familiar with the unseen parts of Hogwarts could provide insight or assistance, even if reluctantly. Her ability to phase through walls, listen unseen, and observe without fear of attack could have been invaluable. Yet no adult, student, or staff member sought her aid, or any ghost's aid. Perhaps most perplexing is the behaviour of Moaning Myrtle. She haunts the very bathroom that holds the entrance to the Chamber of Secret. It is her favourite place to wail, to sob about her death, to splash toilet water at unsuspecting girls, and yet she never mentions hearing the basilisk pass through her pipes, when Hermione is later petrified, having just discovered the truth about the monster's use of plumbing to move through the castle. Myrtle remains oblivious. For a ghost so attentive to every insult and intrusion, one who claims to notice every giggle and snub, her ignorance of a giant serpent entering and exiting her porcelain domain stretches belief. Even when she finally reveals how she died, she does so casually, only because Harry and Ron directly ask her while hiding in the girls' bathroom. She says, "I just remember seeing a pair of great, big, yellow eyes. My whole body seized up and then I was floating away." This memory is critical. It confirms that the basilisk kills by direct eye contact. Yet no one thought to ask Myrtle sooner. She herself never volunteered it, not even after the first petrification. Given that her very death was tied to the chamber, her unwillingness or inability to speak up seems to contradict her established personality as an attention-seeking ghost. Meanwhile, ends up petrified himself, not by the basilisk's stare, but indirectly through a camera reflection used by Justin Finch Fletchley. This suggests that ghosts can be affected at least to some extent by the basilisk's power, but even then one might expect that in the days leading up to his own attack he would have sensed something, seen something, heard something. As a ghost, he had access to conversations and places the living students could not reach. That none of the ghosts knew or cared to find out what was happening beneath their very feet makes their existence in this installment of the series feel oddly hollow. It is not only the ghosts who fail to act, but also the adults who fail to involve them. Dumbledore, renowned for his wisdom, trusted Fawkes the Phoenix to help Harry in the chamber, yet never once appears to task the ghosts with patrolling the halls or reporting suspicious activity. When Hogwarts is gripped by fear and students are confined to common rooms, no one thinks to use the castle's own phantom population as informants. It raises the question, if ghosts cannot or will not assist in a time of mortal danger, what is their purpose within the school beyond decoration and comic relief? This moment in Chamber of Secrets also breaks an unspoken rule of Rowling's world-building, that everything introduced has meaning and function. Ghosts are not just atmospheric elements, they are characters with memories, emotions, and relationships. Peeves, though not a ghost, is shown to eavesdrop on secret meetings and exploit information for chaos. Why couldn't a real ghost do the same for good? The logic falters when beings capable of omnipresent surveillance are reduced to passive ornaments. Their silence, collectively, becomes a narrative hole too wide to ignore. Even in the moments when they do speak, such as when the Fat Friar expresses hope that the culprit isn't a Hufflepuff, their comments are whimsical and detached from the grave situation. The ghosts are framed more as gossipers than guardians, floating above the chaos with the emotional investment of an outsider. But Hogwarts is their eternal home. One would think that after centuries of occupancy, they'd care more for the well-being of the students who fill their corridors. Their failure to act is even more jarring when compared to the House Elves, another marginalized magical group. In Goblet of Fire, we see that elves like Dobby are willing to risk their safety to protect Harry. Dobby warns Harry about dangers, steals gillyweed for him, and defies his masters. Ghosts, however, do not display such loyalty or concern. This contrast exposes a strange inconsistency in how various non-human characters are portrayed. Ghosts seem emotionally distant, even when they have the means to prevent suffering. There is also the question of tradition. Hogwarts is full of ancient customs and rituals. Why isn't there a single magical protocol in which ghosts are involved during school crises? Do they have no role in the school's protection? If so, why are they there at all? Are they forbidden by some magical law from intervening in the affairs of the living? Rowling never says. Instead, readers are left to assume that hundreds of years of spectral presence have yielded no wisdom, no vigilance, and no desire to serve. The dramatic irony of this absence is compounded by the fact that ghosts often provide crucial information later in the series. The Grey Lady's confession in Deathly Hallows is key to finding the lost diadem. Moaning Myrtle helps Harry in Goblet of Fire with the golden egg. Nearly Headless Nick offers insight into the nature of death in Order of the Phoenix. But during one of the school's most immediate threats, a monster petrifying children, none of them stir. Their silence is not just suspicious, it is deafening. Ultimately, the absence of ghosts in the investigation of the Chamber of Secrets undermines both the tension of the story and the believability of the world. In a castle haunted by spirits, it makes no sense that the living must face every danger alone. Their inaction is not just a missed opportunity for storytelling, it is a strange and unexplained gap in an otherwise meticulous universe. The ghosts of Hogwarts are omnipresent, eternal, and utterly useless when it matters most. Number 25. Why didn't anyone check the pipes? The moment misses. Norris is found petrified in the hallway, hanging like a limp rag from a torch bracket. Something should have changed. For any adult at Hogwarts to dismiss this as anything other than an emergency involving internal danger borders on negligence. Argus Filch's howling grief fills the corridor, and yet the professors begin their investigation not with any urgency to identify a physical intruder, but with vague suspicions and passive warnings. Dumbledore, headmaster of the most magical school in the wizarding world, stares at the message written in blood. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware. He observes the petrified cat, listens to Filch's accusations, and says only, "I suggest we all return to our dormitories." There is nothing more to be done tonight, but something was crawling beneath their feet, literally. In a castle where staircases move, paintings talk, and ghosts float through walls, it's perhaps easy to forget that solid, mundane things like pipes and plumbing even exist, but they do. And in this case, they're the perfect hunting grounds for a creature that has already attacked a cat, a student, and will go on to endanger many more. The sound of hissing becomes a recurring motif in the narrative. Harry hears it in the walls, soft and slithering, a serpentine whisper no one else can understand. It isn't merely a symbolic choice. The pipe system carries the Basilisk's whispers just as easily as it carries water, and yet the adult wizards never think to inspect these dark passageways. Never summon a spell to map or scan the plumbing for life forms. The Ministry of Magic has entire departments dedicated to magical infrastructure. If magical elevators can function in the Ministry's headquarters and the flu network can be regulated, then surely magical inspections of plumbing are not out of the question. Professors like Flitwick and McGonagall, adept in their respective fields, could have performed complex detection charms. Yet the most that is done is a series of school assemblies and frightened speculation. Professor Snape suggests suspending the dueling club after a student is attacked, not ordering a systematic search. Filch grumbles, Peeves taunts. Even after Hermione Granger herself is petrified, no one looks into the spaces where the creature travels. When the second victim, Colin Creevey, is found clutching his camera in a frozen, horrified pose, the implications should have sparked action. Colin's body shows no wounds. His eyes are wide open. He has been attacked by something that does not need to be seen to petrify. This clue, combined with the ongoing hiss in the walls, would point any logical adult to believe that the attacker is both mobile and silent. Where could something move undetected through stone walls? Only within the school's internal structures, pipes, ducts, crawl spaces. If something is moving between locations and leaving no physical trace, why assume it walks? Hogwarts is an ancient structure, full of secrets but also carefully maintained. The house elves in the kitchens work tirelessly. The plumbing in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom functions. The bath in the prefect's quarters is luxurious and magically enhanced. It's clear that pipes are not forgotten relics. They are in active use, and yet not a single member of staff proposes a basic scan of the water system. No engineer wizard is summoned, no enchanted probe is sent down to seek what lies hidden. Dumbledore, so often portrayed as all-knowing, remains curiously passive. His expression remains grave, his speeches are solemn, but when asked directly by Lucius Malfoy if he knows who is responsible for the attacks, Dumbledore only says, "No, I do not. However, I believe that the culprit is still at large." That is not enough. For a headmaster with access to centuries of magical lore and a team of elite professors, it is strange that more aggressive action is not taken. Hogwarts is not just a school, it is a fortress, and fortresses are supposed to be protected from internal infiltration. Professor McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress and Transfiguration Master, shows concern, but she too never steps beyond disciplinary measures and protective rules. She discusses curfews and restricted corridors. When Ginny Weasley disappears, her tone becomes desperate, but by then it is far too late. Ginny has been communicating with the spirit of Tom Riddle through a diary that eventually leads her into the very heart of the plumbing system, the chamber itself. Snape, with all his cynicism and suspicion, seems like the most likely candidate to suspect foul play in the castle's infrastructure. He distrusts Harry. He knows Slytherin history. He even keeps an eye on Gilderoy Lockhart with thinly veiled contempt. But Snape never follows the hissing. He never connects the dots. He, like all the others, is blinded by surface symptoms and fails to consider that the true monster moves in silence and shadow, using the pipes as veins of the castle. The prefects do not patrol the bathrooms. The ghosts, who travel freely, do not report unusual sightings in the plumbing. Not even Myrtle, who haunts the bathroom from which the creature emerges, is questioned in depth. She simply wails and tells Harry, Ron, and Hermione that the last time she was alive, she saw 2 glowing yellow eyes by the sink. That's it. That clue alone should have triggered an immediate inspection of every plumbing fixture in the building. Yet the only ones who take it seriously are 2 12-year-olds, and their half-regrown defense against the dark arts teacher, a man who openly admits he's a fraud. Lockhart, the most ridiculous adult on staff, is the one assigned to remove the creature in the end. And that's not because he's competent, it's because everyone else is too paralyzed by fear or bound by bureaucracy. Even the staff who care about the students, like Sprout and Pomfrey, never attempt to follow the logical trail. With students being petrified, not killed, the adults treat the threat with puzzling hesitation. There's no mention of sealing off access to the plumbing, no attempt to place protective enchantments in bathrooms, no coordination with the Ministry's Department of Magical Maintenance. Even after Hermione leaves behind a torn page from Moster Potente Potions revealing that the monster is a basilisk, no one puts this together until Harry reads it. Hermione, who lies petrified in the hospital wing, solved the mystery alone, scribbling pipes in the margins. The adults, meanwhile, remain oblivious. This singular clue, scribbled in desperation, is what allows Harry and Ron to reach the truth. They run through the school, dodge teachers, and enter the forbidden bathroom. 2 children, alone, facing an ancient monster. When they reach the entrance, they speak Parseltongue. The sink slides away, revealing a dark, spiraling tunnel. It's here that the truth finally unfurls. The plumbing wasn't just a travel system, it was the secret doorway to the chamber. Generations of students and staff had walked past it. Myrtle died there. The sink had a snake engraved on it, and still no one thought to check it. Not a single aura, not a single teacher. The negligence becomes more surreal when you consider magical surveillance. Marauder's map exists, capable of showing movements throughout the school. Magical creatures such as thestrals or house elves might have been able to traverse the pipes unnoticed. Enchanted objects could have been deployed to explore inaccessible areas, and yet no initiative is taken. Perhaps it's because the truth is uncomfortable that in a place built on secrets, no one truly wants to uncover the darkest one. It took a Parselmouth to enter the chamber, but it didn't take a Parselmouth to investigate the plumbing. Any adult could have done that. A student solved the mystery not with great magic, but with logic, observation, and a willingness to follow what others ignored. Pipes are not glamorous. They don't draw attention like a cursed necklace or a flying broomstick. But they carried the creature. They were the artery of evil. And no one looked. In the end, the chamber was opened, not by brilliance, but by failure. A failure to see the obvious. A failure to think like a monster. A failure to look where no one wanted to look. The pipes. That is where the serpent waited, and that is where it could have been stopped. Number 26. Why build a monster lair inside a school? The Chamber of Secrets, hidden beneath the ancient stones of Hogwarts, remains one of the strangest and most perplexing elements in the entire Harry Potter saga. Salazar Slytherin, one of the 4 legendary founders of the school, designed this chamber in complete secrecy, away from the eyes of his fellow founders. The goal, as legend tells it, was chillingly clear: to unleash a monster upon the school and purge it of those Slytherin deemed unworthy Muggle-borns. But the question lingers like an echo in the dungeon corridors. Why place such a destructive weapon within the walls of a school he helped build? Why risk the lives of not only Muggle-borns but also countless other witches and wizards, perhaps even some of his own future descendants? Slytherin's hatred for Muggle-borns is well documented in wizarding lore. As Dumbledore once explained, Salazar Slytherin wished to be more selective about the students admitted to Hogwarts. He believed that magical learning should be kept within all magic families. Yet building a chamber inside Hogwarts itself seems to run counter to any strategic logic. Why not construct such a lair elsewhere, perhaps deep in the Forbidden Forest or in some far-off abandoned fortress? Why risk detection, intervention, or even accidental disaster in a place teeming with young students? When the Basilisk roamed the pipes of Hogwarts in Harry's second year, its trail of terror led to petrified students, chaos in the halls, and fear gripping the school. But it also led to one unavoidable truth: the monster, however terrifying, could not operate in secrecy forever. Myrtle Warren, known forever as Moaning Myrtle, was the first and only recorded death in the chamber's history before the events of the book. Her death, although covered up as a tragic accident, revealed a fundamental flaw in Slytherin's plan. The creature could be discovered. The chamber, however hidden, was not entirely immune to exposure. The Basilisk, a monstrous serpent born from a chicken egg hatched beneath a toad, is nearly impossible to control. It obeys only the voice of a Parselmouth, those rare witches and wizards who can speak Parseltongue. Slytherin, being one himself, could command it. But what of his descendants? Could he truly assume that centuries down the line, his own bloodline would survive, remain loyal to his ideology, and possess the same rare magical gift? The plan required not just faith, but precision over generations. It demanded a descendant who not only shared his beliefs, but could access a chamber sealed by ancient, complex magic. That level of control over the future seems irrational, even for a powerful wizard. Tom Riddle, later known as Lord Voldemort, fulfilled that vision nearly 1,000 years after Slytherin's death. But even Riddle, brilliant and manipulative as he was, failed to account for everything. His diary Horcrux unleashed chaos, yes, but it also provoked questions. Professors, ghosts, and even students began to suspect that Hogwarts held secrets older than anyone dared to imagine. Ron Weasley, stunned by the violence surrounding them, called it mad that a monster could live beneath their feet for so long. And he was right. The entire plan teetered on implausibility. If Slytherin had truly wished To exterminate Muggleborns in large numbers, there were far more efficient methods. Poisoning, mass curses, or even alliances with dark creatures like Dementors or Giants could have fulfilled his aims with greater effect. Why choose a solitary beast that could only kill when commanded by a Parselmouth? Why isolate the plan to one child, in one location, centuries in the future? The logic collapses under scrutiny. Even a cruel genius like Salazar Slytherin would know that evil plans require simplicity, not centuries of secrecy and blind hope. One must also consider the nature of the chamber itself. The entrance, hidden behind a sink in the girls' bathroom, was camouflaged with extreme care. It required the utterance of a specific phrase in Parseltongue. When Harry finally opened it, he said, "Open up," in a language he didn't even realize he could speak. But again, why such elaborate barriers? If the goal was truly mass extermination, then such limited access only serves to delay the plan's fulfillment indefinitely. The monster slept for centuries, accomplishing nothing. The choice of Hogwarts as the location introduces another flaw. This wasn't a private fortress where Slytherin ruled with absolute power. He had 3 equal partners, Godric Gryffindor, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Helga Hufflepuff, who did not share his views. As the tale goes, the rift between Slytherin and the other founders grew deeper until he finally left the school. If he knew he would not remain, why tie such a dangerous plan to a place he no longer controlled? Why leave behind a weapon in enemy territory? The risk of exposure was too great, the consequences too chaotic. Dumbledore himself later described Hogwarts as the safest place in the wizarding world, protected by powerful enchantments and invisible barriers. Yet the chamber undermines that completely. If a single student could find and open it, even unintentionally, it would bring the entire school crashing down. And indeed, the events of the second book nearly resulted in the school's closure. If not for the intervention of Fawkes, the Phoenix, and the bravery of 2 12-year-olds, Hogwarts might have fallen to a plan born from one man's ancient hatred. Even Voldemort, the heir of Slytherin himself, eventually abandoned the chamber. After the events of the second book, he never sought to use the Basilisk again. He could have, perhaps, returned during his rise to power. But he didn't. That choice speaks volumes. Even he knew that the chamber was a relic, too unstable, too public, and too vulnerable. He relied instead on Death Eaters, magical terror, and political infiltration. Slytherin's monstrous pet had become obsolete in the face of more modern, effective evil. Perhaps the chamber was not a weapon, but a symbol. Perhaps Slytherin, isolated and scorned by his peers, built it as a dark promise, a monument to his beliefs hidden where none could reach it except the chosen. If that's the case, it becomes even stranger that he chose Hogwarts as its resting place. To build a symbol of hatred in a place meant for learning and unity, perhaps it was a final act of rebellion, a curse upon the very institution he helped create, meant to outlast him like a shadow in the walls. The discovery of the chamber, of course, changed everything. Dumbledore knew then that the founders' legacies were more than mere history. They were living, breathing forces that shaped the present. The sorting hat, the house divisions, the secret bloodlines, all of it gained new weight. As Hermione later observed, you'd think the school would be the last place for something like that. But perhaps it was precisely the school's noble purpose that made it the perfect place for Slytherin's revenge. A place of learning corrupted by secrecy, poisoned from within. Even the physical construction of the chamber defies logic. Its sheer scale, the enormous stone serpents, the massive central statue of Slytherin himself, implies years of labor. Did no one notice? Did the other founders not sense powerful enchantments forming under their feet? Did the house elves, the ghosts, or even the magical architecture remain blind? The only answer is that the chamber existed outside time, in some pocket dimension layered under reality. But that only raises more questions. If it was that difficult to access, then how did Slytherin expect anyone to find it after him? In the end, Slytherin's plan accomplished almost nothing. The Basilisk was awakened once. It killed one girl and petrified a handful of students. Its very presence nearly destroyed the school, not through mass death, but through fear and suspicion. It tore the student body apart, accused the innocent, and forced everyone to confront the past they had long ignored. In that sense, perhaps Slytherin succeeded, not in exterminating Muggleborns, but in sowing the seeds of distrust and division. But the folly of it remains. To build such a structure, to hide such a beast, and to base an entire legacy on an unpredictable heir, it feels more like madness than brilliance. Salazar Slytherin may have been a genius in magic, but in strategy he was short-sighted. He built his revenge on dreams and shadows, buried in a place meant to enlighten. The Chamber of Secrets stands not as a triumph, but as a warning, a reminder that hatred, even when hidden beneath stone, always finds a way to resurface, and always, eventually, collapses under the weight of its own absurdity.